And the quarterfinals as well.
You are discussing or you're not?
No.
You can come talk to us like later, but for now it's like a movie.
So, guys, I'm going to time it. So I'm going to show you the remaining minutes of your speeches. This is half a minute left. This is the end of your speech. If you keep on talking, more than 30 seconds after that.
So,
keep on
yeah.
Oh, there. Okay. Do you have any other questions? This is a closed round. We will not disclose our decision. Okay, if not, I would like to invite the first affirmative speaker to present the affirmative case to the Octofinal round.
All right. Is everyone ready? All right. The definition of a drug is something that is psychologically addictive and detrimental to the individual and society as a whole. Gambling is a drug, and the universal accessibility of the internet promotes the extensive use of this drug. Now, before we get into this debate, we'd like to talk about the two contentions that we're going to bring up. What we will show is first that accessibility to online gambling is detrimental to society. Now, within this contention, we will have two main arguments. The first is about people in poverty, and the second is about minors or underage people. The second contention that we'd like to talk about is online gambling and how it promotes addiction. So without further ado, let's move on to our contentions. Our first contention is that accessibility to online gambling is detrimental to society. Let's start with people in poverty. The internet is always available. Unlike other forms of things, when you are on the internet, you can do many, many things. For example, when you're in poverty, for example, there are no travel costs. Unlike other types of gambling, traditional gambling, where you go to a casino, you have to make the trip, book the flights, pay for the room. This does not apply to people in poverty because it's simply on your computer for anyone to use. And the thing is, people in poverty are much more likely to gamble. They're more prone to it, and it is psychologically and statistically proven that people in poverty are more prone to gambling. And the difference between this and other gambling is that while other gamblers may go for the whole experience, for the fun, for the drinking and the games, this is different. People in poverty are not gambling for the fun of it. They are gambling because they have a lot on the line. It's their livelihoods, it's everyone they care about. It's everything to them. So what this means is that people actually go broke because of online gambling. They see it as not a real thing because when you're paying, it's not like money, it's like a credit card. You slide the card, you pay the money, you lose the money. It's not tangible. It's not the same idea. So what happens is people end up all the time going broke because of because of all of this online gambling. What happens is people see it's incredibly important, and what happens is there are terrible impacts come from this. You're not just hurting the individual, you hurt their entire family. All the money they have, all the things that they're trying to do go away. And what happens is online gambling is proven in people in poverty to promote suicide, depression, and it increases divorce rates, and they lose their home. Basically, all these negative impacts are a direct cause because people in poverty feel that they need to change the situation around, and they are unable to, and they end up victims of the gambling society. Now, the second thing I'd like to talk about are minors, people underage. Now, I think we can all agree that when you go to a normal casino, a 10-year-old or any other minor, unless you look surprisingly old, is going to get checked. You cannot go and gamble because they're going to say, hey, you cannot gamble, you're a minor. However, this does not apply online. It's a distinct difference, again, between normal gambling and online gambling. In online gambling, anyone can do it. They go on an honor code. Anyone can sign up. It's simply a clicking I agree. Now, the negative will have you believe that this is their fault, but the bottom line is that's not true, and we're going to get to that in our second contention. But the first thing is minors end up being the victims. Now, what's so important about minors? Sure, they're kids, but the bottom line is they are more prone to making stupid mistakes, and peer pressure, impulse control. These are all things that minors and people are not fully developed yet. They are not ready to gamble. There's a reason there's a law for gambling, and we cannot say it simply does not apply for online gambling. It applies to everything. So now I'd like to. The bottom line is it's not enforceable the same way it is. It takes away one of the main principles of gambling, that you have to be responsible, and this removes that responsibility. Now, the second thing I'd like to talk about is online gambling and how it promotes addiction. Now, like I talked about, you're alone. There are no social pressures to stop doing something. An example I can give is in a regular casino, some people often feel that they are not going to spend all their money and potentially embarrass themselves and cause a scene. There are social pressures to stop gambling. But when you are alone on your computer, there is no pressure to stop. You are alone and there's no pressure saying do otherwise. And the bottom line is you're online all the time, not just for gambling, because online gambling is inescapable. You're online because you're trying to maybe do work, you're on Facebook. The bottom line is if you're someone who gambles a lot, you're going to end up gambling more. Now, what this thing that makes it seem like a game, like they talk about. And the bottom line is for addicts, there are gambling addicts. This is a rampant problem throughout the world. And the bottom line is once you start, you cannot stop. Like any addiction, like any drug, you do not provide a drug to a person. An example, we have several examples. The first is, online gambling is the equivalent of putting an alcoholic in a liquor store. It's the same principle. It's the same thing as handing a heroin addict a needle to inject. And the bottom line is this is absolutely terrible and detrimental for them. They're not in control. They are victims of a corporation that is for profit, that is trying to profit off of them. And what happens is you cannot escape it. When you cannot escape it. Once you sign up, they ask for your email. They can see through your they can see through your online social media. They send you advertisements. They send you emails. They send you spam. They send you things through the mail. You are bombarded and seen as an entity or a commodity that ends up as a means, something to be squeezed, the juice to be sucked out of, to profit someone who owns this gambling site, which is another thing to bring up. Unlike normal gambling casinos, where there are many taxes that can help benefit society because taxes go to creating schools and whatnot, this does not apply. People who own these online gambling sites are for profit. So what happens is you're taking an addict and you're putting them in a place where they are out of control, and you're putting them at the whim and fancy of those people who are for profit. It's about one person profiting off of many others. And as we can see, these impacts are terrible. You cannot escape. So the other thing I'd like to bring up is that in places where it is banned, casinos are banned, online gambling is still an option. And the bottom line is, in this debate, it's more than just about gambling. It's about people just like you and me. When you are out of control, when you are unsafe, people are exploiting that. And unlike the other forms of gambling, this is the most detrimental and one of the most dangerous things to society. And we have to ask ourselves, are we going to say, well, it's their fault, or are we going to try and help these people and create a more safe world for everyone? And for these reasons, we affirm. Thank you.
Sir, if I'm an addict of Manolo shoes and I buy 10 pairs of shoes every day online, has the government power to ban this kind of thing?
For buying shoes?
Yeah.
Well, I'd say no, but that's a very different example. When you go to buy shoes, you go to the store, you make the trip, and you go there. And most people, I hope, are not shoe addicts, whereas gambling is a proven addiction and is a serious problem and is, as we showed, in your home.
So if I buy these shoes online every single day, and I'm addicted because I spend that much money and I cannot control how much money I spend on that, would you ban it?
I would say that it's still a very different example. It really does depend. We showed gambling is an addiction, not nearly as serious a problem as a shopping addiction, although that is definitely a problem. But another thing in the shoe example, if you want to go off of that, shoes, once you order them, they take several days to get there, even weeks. There are times to cancel your order, whereas gambling is very, very different, especially online, because it's instant. It's right away. You lose money, you upload another $1,000, and that goes away too. It's a cycle, and it just accelerates and accelerates, unlike your example.
Okay, so would you ban poor people investing?
Investing, in stocks?
Yeah.
I would say that that's not what we're talking about, but
Why?
I just don't see a problem with that.
They are actually putting at risk their money, and they're poor. They could lose even more money. Why is that different?
It's absolutely different. You're investing in stocks that could potentially, take time. This is not an instant bang for your buck.
Stocks are pretty fast. Why is it different?
I definitely say that stocks are not nearly as fast as how quickly you can lose $700 gambling online in one hand.
So you're saying that the only difference is fast?
The speed is one component. There are many components that I outlined.
Okay, so would you like to ban gambling at all?
I personally don't think gambling is a great thing, but again, that's not what we're talking about.
So
we showed you, though, that online gambling and gambling at a casino typically are very, very different things.
So you believe banning gambling is only bad when you gamble online?
Well, that's what we're talking about. We're here to discuss online gambling. We showed you distinct reasons why online gambling, as opposed to gambling as a whole, which I don't personally agree with, is a bad idea.
So you're saying that gambling is okay when you go to the casino, but it's not okay when you gamble online?
Again, we're talking about online gambling. It's
Okay.
very different. I don't personally think it's okay, but what we're talking about is online gambling, so we should not look to typical gambling as...
So you're saying that the only problem with this motion is that you can access easily gambling online?
Well, the problems I have, I outlined for 6 minutes in my first speech.
Okay, thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that banning would be okay by the government when there is a very clear spillover and when there is no way to regulate something. For example, public nudity. However, in this case, ladies and gentlemen, we see the case is very different. We see that the proposition is targeting one very specific group, and I'll get to that later, and harms on them, and not allowing other people to utilize their fruits of labor, to utilize their own money in a way they want, ladies and gentlemen. And for them to be principally correct in this debate, ladies and gentlemen, for them to be principally and effectively correct, what they would need to do is ban all sources of gambling and even finance investing and betting for them to be for their policy to work. And I'm going to show that in rebutting their two arguments. So in the first argument, I'm going to talk about how poor people will still be using casinos or anything else, even if this is banned. And the second argument, I'm going to talk about how compulsive gamblers would be doing the same thing as well, as we need to give them the right. And I'm going to tackle some of the details they had in their case. All right, so back to the first argument, ladies and gentlemen, how essentially they said online gambling specifically is detrimental to society. And they had two groups of people that are harmed by this policy. So first of all, ladies and gentlemen, in general what we say, just because particular small groups of society are damaged in this case, case, we don't necessarily see how it's fair for other people to not be allowed this right, ladies and gentlemen. Essentially, they said that poor people are more prone statistically to gamble. That is true, ladies and gentlemen. However, and they said that this is going to be different when it's online gambling because you don't have any travel costs. What we say to that, ladies and gentlemen, because you've already pointed out that most likely, if you have to gamble over and over again, whether it's online or not, you're a compulsive addict. It's a psychological addiction. Then you're probably going to take the bus downtown to gamble in a casino, even if online gambling is banned, ladies and gentlemen. Because they imagine, ladies and gentlemen, that all the world's casinos are located in Las Vegas, and if you live somewhere in Singapore, if you're poor, you can't probably take the train down there, ladies and gentlemen. But that's not true. Travel costs are really negligible here, especially if you have a psychological condition that forces you to do that, ladies and gentlemen. And they had their reason, and this reason, the reasoning they gave us supports our case, ladies and gentlemen. They said it's everything to these poor people. They can't do anything but gamble when they have turned into compulsive gamblers, and we see exactly why the situation is not going to change. However, you're going to deny this right to other people, which should have the right to utilize their fruits of labor. And the second thing, ladies and gentlemen, and they use an analogy, it's like placing a poor person in a liquor store, ladies and gentlemen. But, ladies and gentlemen, we still don't ban alcohol to the rest of society because it gives them pleasure, because it gives them entertainment. What we do is we place regulations. We allow families to put them in anonymous alcoholics, as well as for compulsive gambling therapy sites, and we have regulations to do that. Now, for minors, ladies and gentlemen, and this is a minor point, ladies and gentlemen, essentially we see that whether it's a casino that is real, whether it's a casino that's online, ladies and gentlemen, you still have to legally verify your identity as you would in a physical casino, because you have to have a credit card, and kids are not allowed to have credit cards, or you would have to steal it from your parents, and we see that's a responsibility for your parents. Same as for pornography, ladies and gentlemen. We don't ban pornography for all society because there's the off chance that kids are going to see it. Now, second argument, ladies and gentlemen, how it's an addiction and we should ban it as other substances that cause addictions. So essentially the reasoning was that you will want to gamble online because you're alone and sad, and that's why you're going to Google online gambling, and we're going to do that. So, ladies and gentlemen, we don't see a clear link of just because you're alone and you can access it better, that is going to lead to more gambling. What we see, ladies and gentlemen, in comparison to regular gambling, for example, we see that online gambling is still less appealing than regular gambling, because when you get into a casino, first of all, the dealers constantly urge you to bet more and more, while the computer, ladies and gentlemen, is not going to do that. In a casino, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to be offered drinks, you're going to be offered hospitality, you're going to be offered marketing, ladies and gentlemen. But however, in online gambling, it's all very depersonalized, it's all very unemotional compared to that. So for them to be consistent, they would have to ban all forms of gambling online and in the real world, as well as for finance investing, ladies and gentlemen, because you can invest online large sums of money and lose it on the off chance that you just simply had a bad day. For shares, this is exactly the same. You may bet on a roulette, ladies and gentlemen, and there's the off chance that you will lose or win. So they would need to specify how the government doesn't have a burden in that case to ban it. However, in this one, they do. And we see, ladies and gentlemen, and they have said that if you're compulsive, you're going to gamble more. We see that applies to every single case in real life. If you're compulsive, you're going to take the trip downtown to a casino or to a spot where you can simply operate the machine and put your money in. We see there is no real difference here, except that we see that casinos are even more appealing for people. But we see that there is a clear harm in this case, ladies and gentlemen, because the government, for these marginalized groups who are not going to be helped by their policy, is banning the right to every other person to entertain themselves, whether it's rational or irrational. They're denying them the right to use their money that they have spent their own time on producing, ladies and gentlemen, on the off chance that a minor or a person who's already a compulsive gambler is going to gamble online. And we see that the government doesn't have the right to do that, especially if it has the possibility to regulate it for those people, and that it has a possibility to help these people under the status quo, and especially since their policy doesn't change a single thing. A compulsive gambler is going to stay compulsive and is going to gamble even if there's no online gambling. However, the rest of society will lose that chance to entertain themselves and to use what they have worked for. So for all these reasons, we oppose.
Why are drugs like cocaine, marijuana, and heroin illegal?
I don't know, because they're detrimental to your physical health and they have physical consequences when
What's
you
the
don't use
definition
them.
of a drug?
What's the definition of a drug? It's
Yeah.
a drug that's either psychologically, or
So
usually
drug-
both psychologically and
So you're saying that a drug
physically
you're saying
addictive.
that a drug can be something that's psychological and or physical.
Yeah, drugs aren't banned everywhere, as well as alcohol and cigarettes and
It
nicotine
doesn't matter what the
are
status.
drugs.
Okay, it doesn't matter what the status quo is. I'm
Although-
asking you, what is the definition?
Although you're trying to argue that just because drugs are banned in some place, that means that gambling can be banned in some place, but you're not providing us the reasoning why it is so in several countries.
Why do you think several countries ban drugs in the first place?
I don't know, tell me.
I will. Two, how do we regulate alcohol?
We regulate alcohol so that minors can't reach,
No,
which is
how do we regulate alcohol?
we regulate by pricing it at higher levels than it normally would. We regulate it by
Wait, wouldn't minors be able to just buy more, like using more money? Wouldn't rich minors be able to buy alcohol if we regulate it this way?
what could you?
You're saying the way we regulate alcohol is because we price it higher, right?
No, and we
okay.
also ban access for minors.
How do we
so
ban
they,
access? How do
we
ban it?
don't sell it to minors. That is pretty simple.
How do we not sell it to minors?
By not
I mean-
giving them the bottle when they give you the money.
Okay, so it has. Okay, cool. And so you're saying that the way we ban alcohol, the only ways to ban alcohol is by not giving them the bottle if they give you the money. Is that the only way?
Unless you remove alcohol from circulation in general.
In general,
which
okay.
we don't see as a feasible choice just
So
because.
you're saying the only way to ban alcohol is one, if we take it away from the circulation.
No,
in
I'm
general,
saying that the
and
status quo is dealing pretty well with not providing alcohol to
really
minors.
because Kosovo brought 2 liters of alcohol, and they couldn't provide it, but they
they
still
have a
had it.
coach.
Oh, okay. Well, they still have it, right? So
They have the coach.
We're still not regulating the use of alcohol. If you're saying it's this addictive, are you?
All right, our argument fails because Kosovo brought in
No, I'm saying-
two
I'm
bottles
not-
of alcohol. I'm
Kosovo's,
sorry.
I don't want to talk about Kosovo. They're my friends.
right.
How do we regulate alcohol? You're saying the only way to regulate alcohol in the first place is to take it either out of circulation or by pricing it higher. Can you name another way?
By not allowing people who are not supposed to get it.
Wait, that's not answering the question. How?
How?
Yeah, how-
I have
how
given
are-
you pass a law.
Okay. You passed a law. Okay. What is the difference between gambling and investing?
What is the difference between gambling and investing?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes investing takes a little bit more intelligence.
Wait, but
than gambling.
investing is like an objective kind of explicit thing that everybody like even.
As well as poker. Poker can be objective and is considered
I'm saying-
objective by a lot of
The
people.
question is, what's the difference between gambling and investing?
We see that it doesn't make a clear. It doesn't really matter what is the difference because the process of
No, I'm
gambling
not
and
asking
investing
you-
is the
I'm not asking
same,
you
and
if it
it's
doesn't matter.
online.
I'm not asking you. Okay. Thank you.
the judges ready? So my opponent stepped up here today and stated that banning something is okay when there's no way to regulate it. And however, this is exactly why internet gambling should be banned in the first place. Because there is no way to regulate the internet. Because internet is unregulatable, it is inherently able to be banned. Because so many people have access to it, so many people have universal access to it, so many people can simply do it at the comfort of their homes, it should be banned. Now let's move on to what my opponents have stated against our case, in which they actually created their offense, so we should be able to base it entirely on the affirmative world. Now, against our first point, where we talk about poverty, they state that just because a small group is going to be harmed doesn't mean that it should be banned for everyone, and that compulsive addicts can simply go downtown and gamble there, because Las Vegas is not the only place where casinos are available. However, this is not true. For example, many countries around the world, and many states even inside the United States, already have banned casinos and gambling. Places like California and New York and places and in certain European countries, we see that casinos in essence are banned. And there is a reason for this, because they are detrimental to the society that it is in. Now what we see here is that this means that in these places where it is banned, it undermines the laws of this country or of this state to go online and gamble there. So what we see here is that this is actually undermining the laws that are already in place. And furthermore, we see that their contention, their idea that people can simply go somewhere and gamble there falls, meaning that this idea that they're stating that we have no solvency, that we're not solving for this problem, is not necessarily true, only because the internet is available to everyone. The mere fact that we can do it comfortably makes it accessible and makes it available and makes it alluring to that many more people. Now, against our case, furthermore, they state that we don't necessarily ban alcohol because to the rest of the population. However, this is actually inherently true, but what we see is that the internet makes it, once again, a unique factor away from all of these drugs and all of these other policies that my opponents are talking about. Because the internet is so accessible, because the internet, as they stated, is unregulatable, we see that it is deserving to be banned. Now, I quote my opponent when he even says that banning something is only okay when we can regulate it, or when we cannot regulate it. And this is essentially why, this is the main reason why it simply should be banned, because it cannot be regulated, because we cannot control those in poverty, because we cannot control minors, because we cannot control those that are addicted from simply not going on the internet. These are essentially reasons why it is not able to be regulated, and these are the reasons why it should be banned. Now, even against minors, they state that whether it is real or online, we must verify our age, and for example, we gave this idea of the liquor store. However, whether it is real or tangible, or real or online, it is different, because when you are in real life, it's easy to see whether or not someone is a minor, and even if it isn't, we can simply ask them for a card. When you can sign up for online poker simply by clicking I agree, or simply by providing a credit card, it makes it so much more accessible to so many more minors, because so many minors actually do have a credit card. I am a 17-year-old, and I simply do have a credit card because this is legal in places where I can do so. Now, what this shows is that it's accessible to minors, meaning that it's promoting minors, it's promoting illegal activities, meaning that because it's not available to minors, or because they state that it should not be available to minors, simply doesn't mean that minors aren't going to go on and do it. They are easily able to access it, and because of this, we see that it cannot be regulated. Now, our second contention, talking about addiction, they state that if it is easier to access, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be more of it. However, while this may be true, it does not apply in the realm of online poker because it is simply accessible. We see that online poker is a giant community, so it obviously means that people are going on it. It doesn't mean that just because it's easier to access doesn't mean that more people are going to go on it. While this even, once again, may be true, it's not the case in online poker. Otherwise, this resolution would have no real tangible bearings into the society. Because the online poker community is so huge, this is why we are debating it. This is why we're debating the moral aspects of it. Furthermore, they say that casinos are more appealing, and this is essentially what makes the difference. Meaning that people in poverty, people that are addicts, don't play poker because they're wanting to be entertained, or they're not playing poker just because of the ambience of the casino. They're doing it staking their livelihood. They're doing it staking their families. They're doing it staking divorce and house, or losing their homes, and even combating depression and suicide. They're not doing it only because they want to go to a casino and experience the ambience ambience of it. They're doing it for all of these negative reasons, and this is essentially why it must be banned. It can't be regulated to addicts, especially when addicts can simply hide it from their friends, especially when addicts can go into a closet and do it whenever they want to. What we see here is that because it is not able to be regulated to those in poverty, to those that are in minors, and to those that are addicted to it, we see that it must be banned, especially because my opponents have even agreed to the fact that if it is unregulatable, it should be banned. And for these reasons, we urge a strong affirmative ballot. Thank you.
All right, you said the internet is impossible to regulate. Is a ban a form of regulation on the internet?
I would say yes.
For most companies or most websites, can the government regulate what is within the contents of that website or?
I understand the question.
Can they?
While they may not be able to regulate the content, they can disable access to it.
So it's impossible to regulate the content, right? And it's impossible to threaten to disable access when you are not in line with government's regulations online. Is that impossible?
Sorry, I did not understand.
Is it impossible to shut down the site when it's out of line with the regulations that the government has set for it?
I don't believe so.
You can't shut it down. You just said you can't shut down anything.
Yes, you can, you can.
Yes. So isn't that a way to regulate gambling sites? When you simply don't allow them some leeway of letting people do whatever they want on that because there are government regulations as for casinos.
Right. The issue is that there's actually no transparency, meaning that these people that go online or to it, meaning that...
No. I'm talking from the perspective of the government.
Right.
So essentially, you agree that the government can regulate sites in a specific manner. It's possible, right?
To an extent, sure.
To an extent. All right. Thank you. The second thing. All right. Are cigarettes addictive?
Yeah.
Right. And are they dangerous to your health?
Yes.
And they probably can also be psychologically or socially addictive, right?
Socially, I'm not entirely sure.
All right. And kids can find ways to find cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
But generally, it's not allowed.
What do you mean?
For kids to buy cigarettes. And there are laws in place that prevent that, right?
Yeah, but the difference is
So essentially you're saying that for that minor group, which is the children, and the minor part of that group that may have some sort of access illegally,
right, exactly.
we should ban cigarettes for everybody else.
No, the issue is that
why are cigarettes that you can obtain
it's more easily regulated. It's 100% more easily regulated.
Why?
Especially versus
Why?
reality.
If you just admitted that you can regulate the internet.
Because, once again, there's something different from the virtual and the real. For example, like you said, you need to verify your age online, but then that's not even necessarily true. I have a credit card on me. That means that I can sign up for online poker, but that doesn't make it any less illegal because I'm a minor.
All right. Is your credit card possibly linked to your parents who are responsible to how you deal with it? And can banks put restrictions on how you use your linked credit card to your parents?
Mine is not linked to my parents' credit card.
Yours is not? No. That's very interesting. All right. The second thing that you said, that the online poker community is a giant community, that therefore we should ban it. Why?
No. I was simply repeating the point where you said that just because it's easier to access doesn't mean that more people will go to it. Simply because I stated that because there are so many people in the online poker community, that refutes the point that more people prefer casinos to online poker.
All right. Thank you.
think you still hear me. Yep. Oh, that. Yes. Sorry. Thanks. Everyone's ready? Okay. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I might be pulling a Kanye West, but I'm saying Team Affirmative does not care about people. Because of their policy of blanket policy of ban, they do not solve the problems of the poor or the minors, but what they do, they take away the pleasure of one's using its money to, his money or her money in the way that he pleases. They take away the opportunity to seek pleasure, and they do not solve any problems of those two minor groups that they were talking about. And dear ladies and gentlemen, that's what we want to prove to you today, that there are ways to prevent harms to the groups that they themselves specified, and save the general public. And that's with regulations and not with an outright ban. And this is how I'll form my speech, dear ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, tackling their first argument, their first contention, I'll question whether harsh policy of a ban is appropriate to decrease access to gambling. And secondly, I'll talk about how is ban acceptable to decrease, addictions to gambling. Dear ladies and gentlemen, on that first contention, they specified themselves two groups that they want to protect: the poor, compulsive gamblers essentially, and the minors, dear ladies and gentlemen. And we said that we have regulations in place to do that, and their policy of a ban would not work. On the poor, why the ban wouldn't work? Because even though they ban online gambling, they leave out casinos, which are still accessible because you can have a small casino outside of Las Vegas, you can still have a casino outside of Manhattan, and so on and so on. And that's in the majority of the countries, and not in one city, in one country. So in majority of the cases, casinos are still accessible. But furthermore, they do not ban online betting. They do not ban essentially any other way of risky profit making. They do not ban investing. They do not ban online bets, Lombards or whatever. So we see how compulsive people in need would still have this. They would still be left in the situation that they're in, desperately making money. So ban would not work. But what we offer, though, what the status quo offers, is that the poor people have caps on spending. Casinos and online gambling sites impose that. Secondly, the families of the poor or the compulsive gamblers can report their beloved ones so that casinos or online gambling sites would not register them. Thirdly, dear ladies and gentlemen, there can be there is a possibility of asking for help of a psychiatrist to help with the addiction and so on and so on. So we see that the poor are not really left in a dire situation, that they are helped in this way, and that we can regulate the harms, and that's why we don't want an outright ban. On the minors, dear ladies and gentlemen, well, the Team Affirmative actually serves as a proof that online protection of minors works, because they have no clue that even though Mr. 17-year-old has a credit card, it would not get him into an online gambling site. Why? Because the credit card is tied to his personal information, or not necessarily parents, but the bank, where it states that he's a 17-year-old. And casinos and gambling sites require you to be of age, of 18 or 21, 25, whatever. But they still require you to be of certain age, because there are age requirements in place, and the credit cards show that, and the credit cards are needed to register. So there's no way of a 10-year-old sneaking into an online gambling site and gambling. So we don't see that. Secondly, of course, families can still supervise their children, and there's no harm in that too. So dear ladies and gentlemen, we see how we can prevent the harms for those two groups that they specified, those two groups that we have to defend. And we fulfill this burden of proof. What we don't want, the outright ban that would then prevent, all the pleasure from all the general public. That's what we contest for. Second argument, dear ladies and gentlemen, about how this ban would supposedly decrease addictions. They themselves, in the cross-examination just held, agreed that, and in the second affirmative speech actually, they agreed that online gambling does not necessarily fuel addictions. They said that yes, it does not pose such entertaining things as liquor offered to you, ladies swarming you, dealers urging you, and so on and so on. People still do it. And their reason for that is that people are desperate for money. And we think, again, much with the first argument, if people are desperate for money, they will find ways, even with a ban on online gambling. And we don't think that's true. That's good. We don't think that outright ban that does not solve anything, just moves the people in need, people addicted, people that are poor but need money. If it just moves them to even riskier profit making, illegal gambling sites, bootleg gambling sites, or investment banking, where you actually do immediately lose money because you cannot take them back if you invest them, even though you don't, stocks
differ in a day or two or whatever, online betting and so on and so on. So they will find ways. The people you want to help will not get help. However, the majority of the society will suffer, dear ladies and gentlemen. And that's why we say, keep the regulations on minors, don't sell them alcohol, but sell them to those of appropriate age, and let the people that have money and want to be entertained gamble, and just help the people in need by regulating them and by actually caring for them. For these two reasons, please oppose the motion.
One second, please.
No problem.
All right, thank you very much for your speech. Is everyone ready? Yep. All right, the first thing I'd like to talk about is why is regular gambling or casino gambling tolerated today in the status quo? Why do we have it?
Because it provides for pleasure, and it's a fundamental right of a citizen to use his money or her money in a way that he or she sees
But aren't
fit.
there lots of benefits to society in regular gambling, such as taxes that
But I
can
do
be
not
used?
think that
aren't
that
taxes
isn't-
used
taxes-
to go to? Aren't the taxes from regular gambling sites used to benefit society in other ways, such as putting money into education and
Even
whatnot?
if that were true,
That
I
is
don't
true.
think that it's the fundamental reason why gambling or
Okay, so my
alcohol
question-
or anything exists.
Okay,
We drink not
thank
because
you for your
of
answer.
taxes that we pay to
My
the
question,
government.
though, is how does online gambling promote these objectives, such as promoting education, promoting society, that
Well,
regular gambling does
you
not?
still
or
have
that
to
regular
register
gambling
your
does?
for-profit company that you've
No.
defined on the web, and you still
No, but
pay
aren't
taxes
online
for it.
gambling sites designed that they do not benefit society?
No,
That they
do.
only go to
They
the
do.
profit. That they only go to the profit of the site owner.
No, they do. Still,
How
the
so?
site
How so?
the site owner still pays taxes for having his
No,
company
but
run
aren't there
illegally.
explicit taxes in regular gambling that must go through the federal government directly because they are regular
I
gambling?
do believe so. Maybe in
Okay,
your
I'd like to move on
county,
to another
no.
issue because we're running out of time.
Of
Please.
course.
All right. The second thing is you talked about casinos are still accessible, right?
Of course.
Okay. So if casinos are so accessible, why do we have online gambling in the first place?
Because some like it, to sit at their house. Some like it to sit in the basement. Because we live in this society where we want things easy and convenient, and that's what we
Right.
have.
But isn't this easy and convenient factor very dangerous?
Regardless, it still exists because it's easy and convenient.
So
and
you're
it's
saying
fun.
it's okay to let people enjoy themselves even though there are free alternatives that don't use money, even at the cost of tons and tons of lives and it
Could you
hurts
paraphrase
society.
this, please?
Oh, sure. What I'm saying is, so you're saying it's okay to hurt people so long as some people are simply entertained.
What I'm saying is that
It's
even-
okay to promote depression and suicide
We
even though
do
some
not
people are
prom-
entertained.
We do not
right?
promote depression and suicide. We have
Okay.
regulations
I'd like to
against
move-
that,
okay, thank
and
you.
we do want to
Okay.
defend the
I'd like to move on to
fundamental right of each person,
Okay.
regardless,
I understand.
to
Now,
entertain
yeah.
himself.
The other thing I'd like to talk
herself.
about, you said there are a lot of outlets to get help, right? That you
There
can talk
are.
to a family. So why is addiction a problem still, in any context?
Because you first get addicted, then get help, or
Okay,
you
do
get
addicts get
reported
help?
when you get symptoms.
Do addicts
yes, they
get help
do.
all the time?
Yes, or
Okay, all the
if
time, thank
someone who cares for them reports that.
But don't
or
lots
they
of people care for people who are addicts and still addicts do not get treated? Isn't addiction still a very rampant
Sir, have you
problem
heard
around the
of-
world?
Well, I hope you haven't, but Anonymous Alcoholics, major association.
My question
for
is, isn't
alcoholics.
addiction still a very relevant problem today, despite
is.
all these outlets that you listed?
But your policy will not help it.
Okay.
What we have is
now the other thing is,
enough.
how in your world, in the negative world, do you benefit the people who we actually benefit? How do you benefit those people?
We prevent harms to them through regulations and safety is ensured.
Okay, thank you.
How much do we have?
5 minutes. Your time is up. Your time is up.
You don't need to water calling.
Five minutes for speech. Sorry, I'm trying to catch my breath. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about three important aspects. I have three voting issues in today's debate, and today we're evaluating whether which side actually promotes, one, accessibility, two, the welfare of the people, no, two voting aspects. Welfare of the people. Now, they said basically, accessibility. They said that people should have the right to livelihood, and they talk about investing. This is the only reason why they say that we should still have gambling in the first place. They say people should have the right to livelihood if we ourselves say that people in poverty rely on this and are addicted to this because they want to have this livelihood. The only problem is that the difference between investments and gambling is that the house always wins in gambling. The reason why the house always wins is because corporations make it this way so that they can actually use them as commodities. This is our third point, meaning that the reason why it's different from investing, which is not addictive while gambling is because the house always wins and that people always see this. And the reason why it is addictive is because it is skewed so that it will be addictive. Corporations make this because they want to make money off of them. This addiction is the reason why they profit. Now, the second thing that they said is that it can be regulated, and they say there's checks on the internet and there's there's age restrictions, etc. But the fact of the matter is that we all know that internet is extremely easy to bypass. The only way that we could actually regulate this is by banning it. He himself conceded in cross-examination that the only way to regulate something that is as harmful as a drug is by banning it and taking it out of circulation. Now, we say that internet cannot be regulated unless it is banned. The reason why internet is not regulatable unless it is banned is because it's so accessible. The reason why they make online poker and online gambling in the first place is so that everybody will have access to it. The reason why it's online is so that everybody has access. That's the whole point of accessible online poker. Now, the second voting issue is welfare. What happens? They say that addicts get treatment, but people who do heroin and marijuana get treatment also. These are drugs that are banned in numerous countries, and the reason why they should be banned is because it is detrimental to both the society and the individual. Their only refutation against all of our impacts, which they concede to, of gambling, because they don't really destroy the fact that it does cause these impacts, is that it can happen, it's still accessible in other gambling places. That's their only refutation to us. But the fact of the matter is that we're not debating if regular casinos should be banned. They said that the reason why we shouldn't ban gambling is because it happens on the other place. It still happens in regular casinos. And the reason why this is false is because we believe that gambling itself is a drug. And the debate is focusing on online gambling, and the reason why it should be banned is because it is going to cause these impacts. One, the point of gambling is that it makes it much harder to stop. The reason why it's online is so that the reason why it's online and that addicts are attracted to this form of gambling is because they're enclosed. The reason why they're addictive and the reason why they hide in secrecy is because they're addictive and they're probably ashamed of it. That's why they make it online. It's secret. Secondly, it's made so that it's accessible to everyone. Because they skew it so that it is forced to be addictive, they make it addictive. It is addictive. And the reason why, and secondly, let's go to the impacts of all this addiction and online gambling. First, divorce rates fall. They didn't address this. The only thing that they say because of this is because the divorce rates rise. The only reason why they say this, the only thing against this that they say is that they have other places of gambling that we could go to. Secondly, suicide rates, depression, loss of home and houses because it has all these impacts that drugs do because it is a drug. The reason why we should ban it in the first place is because it is mainly skewed so that it is accessible to everyone. It has no regulations because internet has no regulations, and secondly because online gambling was made for the sole purpose of having it accessible to everyone. Now, they say that we're only trying to target the poor people and the minors, and we're not. Everyone still has the right to choose what they want, but gambling is available to everyone, and it's forcing addiction. It's causing addiction, and it's causing all these harms. The reason why we should ban this gambling is because it is a drug, and the reason why we ban drugs is because it is detrimental to the individual and society as a whole. The reason why we want this, the reason why you should vote for us is because they provide no offense. All they say is that the reason why we should ban gambling is because it promotes, they should have the right to choose it, and secondly, because it's still accessible. Just because something is still regular casinos are accessible today doesn't mean that we should take their side of the point. Essentially, they have no offense. We're saying that the reason why online gambling should be banned in the first place is because it's addictive. It has it is a drug. It has drug-like qualities and causes these impacts. And thirdly, because it actually harms everybody and is made so that it targets people. So it's actually exponential in that it spreads everything. Essentially, the burden that they provided that we had to prove was that it should be banned if it can't be regulated. We already provided that it can't be regulated and it is detrimental. Therefore, you should affirm the resolution. Thank you.
3 minutes from now.
Ladies and gentlemen, we only agree to a ban where there is no way to regulate something. Then we believe that the thing or object can be banned. We believe that this debate comes down to two free groups in the society. We see poor people, we see children, and we see the rest of the society that wants to gamble. We see that the proposition only actually argued and only debated about these two little groups and left out the rest of society that we believe is going to be harmed by the system. So what I'm going to do in my speech, I'm going to prove you why actually two clash points. Why, first of all, we can regulate this, and why we actually how we actually can regulate children and actually why poor people are still going to gamble. And second, I'm going to actually talk about the effect on the rest of society. So we're going on to the first point about can we regulate, because basically their only line of argumentation was that poor people gamble right now because of necessity, because they need it, because they cannot help it, because they are obsessed, because they're compulsive. And this was the line of argumentation that ran throughout their whole speeches. But what we see actually is that under the status quo, we see already that for example, we see that nothing's going to change, because what we actually argued for, that if a person is obsessive gambler, we see already can actually go to another sphere, to go to a casino. But then they actually changed and shifted their position by saying that, oh, no, we only are debating, we only want to ban online gambling. But we see a clear logical fallacy here, because they always talked about that the gambling is like a drug, that gambling and the drug has to be actually banned. But at the same time, they actually contradict themselves, saying that we should allow only casinos. But then they but what we see that under the status quo and under their model, nothing is going to change if we have compulsive gamblers have the possibility to gamble in casinos. But then they came with an argumentation that casinos actually don't exist in every single country. But ladies and gentlemen, and they provided the examples of the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, just because casino does not exist, it doesn't mean you still cannot gamble. You still have the possibility to go somewhere and to actually go to do the thing you love. But also, what we actually talked about was the investment, and we probably did not understand this point because we never heard any direct response. Because what we told you is that under their model, we should not allow poor people to invest in stocks, because it's also a risky investment that you can easily lose money. Because what they only argued on is that it's very fast and you can fast lose money. But we did the same thing. We never heard explanation, no response why it is different, why we do not allow that, why then poor people are allowed to bet. We never heard that. Also, what we talked about was the children. And we see a very logical fallacy here, because what we actually argued for, that a person actually has to verify his age, he has to actually have a credit card to actually do this. And we never heard explanation why a bank, knowing that you're underage and actually will allow a policy, and why allow you to gamble. And also what we see is that parents can simply ban a website of gambling if they want. So we see that actually that it is not, we can actually regulate. And about regulations, also what they talked about was this example that a Kosovo team has 2 bottles of alcohol and we have to ban alcohol in general. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a rule. What we see, this is actually a breach of law, and we don't allow this in the forum. And of course, Mary should do the same. And we're going to actually just do this, and we actually see it has nothing to do with that. Also, what we see that actually and we have opportunities to regulate something. Also, what we see that, for example, you can have a fake ID in reality, and that's probably how Kosovo got the alcohol. And we see that you can have a fake ID on the internet. It doesn't change the fact that you are not allowed for our children to go there. And what are the effects on the rest of society, ladies and gentlemen? We believe that there is a huge, because what they talk about, you can gamble more, but they actually concede with us that gambling at a casino is even more harmful, because there are other factors that actually engage you to gamble more. And we see the crucial point in this debate, talking about how actually it is even worse. But what we get by this policy, we take away people's right to entertainment. We take away their right to actually spend money where they want, because they actually never expanded why I can actually spend my money obsessively on shoes, but I cannot obsessively spend it on gambling. We see that the government then takes the stance of moral stance, showing where you can and cannot spend money. And we will never support a government that tells you those things. We will never support a government that actually infringes your right on groups that actually cannot be helped. We see, ladies and gentlemen, that actually poor people can be regulated. So, ladies and gentlemen, we beg to oppose the motion.